exactly what they were doing today.
OK, Richard, really good to talk to you. I know you're going to stick around. Richard Galpin there. Let's speak now to French security consultant Olivier Guita, who joins us now via webcam. Mr. Guita, thank you very much for patiently waiting to speak to us. How are these arrests and this raid being seen in Paris?
Look, they're being seen as finally, after the fourth try, the security forces in Belgium have been able to capture Abdeslam. What is really important, and I think is telling, to say that he didn't try to flee Belgium. He stayed there in the open, quote unquote. He was hiding, but he was there for 4 months. So, as your reporter said, I think that what's going to be important now is to look at the support networks, because he could not have gone undetected for 4 months without having a lot of complicity. And I think that's why Belgian security services are going to look very, very closely at what's been happening in Molenbeek and other areas of Belgium.
The US envoy to the anti-Islamic State coalition, Brett McGurk, has been on Twitter, and he said, "Congratulations to the Belgian authorities on the capture of Salah Abdeslam." How much pressure have the Belgian authorities been under?
Look, a lot. From the French first, because obviously they were close to being ridiculed for having let him go and missed him 3 times. There were reports of him being in another district of Brussels for 3 weeks undetected. So they were under a lot of pressure to show that they were competent and that they would get the job done.
But it hasn't just been down to the Belgian authorities, has it? What French involvement has there been?
Look, what has been decided a month ago at the level of the Prime Minister between France and Belgium was open book cooperation, sharing of information. For the first time, I think ever, we saw on Tuesday a joint operation where French counterterrorism forces took part in the raid in Brussels. And that's very telling about how much those two nations need to work together. But that's also a sign for other nations in Europe to look at this and say, if we don't stick together, then all this will happen time and time again.
The Migration State Secretary, Theo Franken, has been tweeting, "We've got him." Clearly, they are very pleased to have him alive. How important was it, as far as you're aware, that they took him alive, even though he might have been wounded?
Hugely important, because for a lot of reasons, unfortunately, we're flying in the blind. So to have somebody that actually took part in the planning, the preparation, the knowledge of all the different networks within Islamic State in Europe is huge. What people have to remember as well is that Abdeslam, compared to the others, got cold feet. And most probably, as we saw, through his suicide belt in Montrouge before leaving. So he might be more willing to talk than somebody that would have been, you know, even more of a hardcore radical that would have taken his life.
His ability to remain in Belgium all this time since those attacks in November in Paris throws up a great deal of questions, as you've said. How surprised are you that he stayed in Europe when there was speculation that he'd fled to Syria?
Look, my take was that I wouldn't see him go to Syria for one reason only. My reasoning is that if he were to rejoin the Islamic State, he would be viewed as someone that decided not to go ahead with the operation. So his life must have probably been more at risk in Syria than staying in Belgium. So it would make sense for him to stay in Europe. Then the question about the support networks come into play. Obviously, the money, the logistics, people renting apartments on his behalf, all this shows that Belgium is still the nexus, if you will, of jihadist terrorism in Europe.
But how likely is it that he's had support from the Middle East, from Islamic State in Iraq or Syria, rather than just support from within Belgium?
I would say that it's unlikely that after an operation that he took part and that he fled in one way, that he would have had more support from Iraq and Syria. I think it was the local networks, and that's what is really worrisome, is that this ingrained radical elements that are living in Belgium at the moment and that could help him. Second point is...
Olivia Guita, we'll stop you there. I would really appreciate you sharing your insight with us. We'll speak to you again in just 1 second. I just want to update people that if you've just joined us, you're watching BBC News, where we're following this raid that is still underway, an operation in the district of Molenbeek in the Belgian capital of Brussels. Stay with us. Olivia Guita, thank you very much for remaining with us. We're speaking to the Managing Director of Global Strat, a security consultancy in France. Olivia, you were talking about this nexus, this network of support. How clear is it to experts like you of the extent of these networks in terms of the number of countries involved, the number of people involved?
Had sleeping cells in Europe. So we've seen that there's been fluid, if you will, exchange of operatives between Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Some have joined. It's massively more than 2005, 2006 because of the number of people that have traveled to Iraq and Syria. So it's not just the people that stayed behind, but the numbers we're talking about, you know, just in the UK or France of potential jihadists in the realm of 2,000 or 3,000 people is mind-boggling in terms of what the security services have to face in terms of threats and means that they need to tackle this threat.
How useful are those people who come back from fighting for Islamic State? How easy are they to trace? Difficult to trace. I think we have to get back to basics, and potentially that's what happened today. Human intelligence, possibly an informer tipped off the Belgian security services about Abdeslam whereabouts in Molenbeek. And I think that's what we need to get is people within the circle or people that are leaving the group to become informers and let us know more about the whereabouts of other people. And as you mentioned, that's what I think Abdeslam is going to be very useful for security services. Olivia Guita from the security consultancy Global Strat, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Well, on the line now is Gabriella Steinhauser, a reporter with the Wall Street Journal, who's at the scene for us in Molenbeek. Gabriella, many thanks for talking to us. Just tell us where you were at the time of the arrest. How much did you see?
I did not witness the arrest. I came here probably after he had been arrested. There were still raids going on in the area here. There's still several streets and a bit cordoned off by police, although some of them are leaving now, so it's quieting down.
And Gabriella, how closely have you been following events over the past week in Molenbeek? Were you there on Tuesday?
I was not there, but I did follow it very closely, of course, as did my colleagues. Because
we've had a great deal of discussion about the role of Molenbeek itself in the course of this week's events. Huge speculation remains as to exactly where Salah Abdeslam has been for the past 4 months. Has he been roaming across Europe, or has he been inside Brussels itself? And just in the last hour, my colleague spoke to a journalist in Belgium who said that locals in Molenbeek did not seem at all surprised that Salah Abdeslam was found amongst the community today.
Well, I'm not sure I can confirm that. In fact, the raid on Tuesday was in a different neighborhood in Brussels, not even all that close to Molenbeek, in Forêt. And it seems that he had been there shortly before or even during the raid, since his fingerprints